Hey, this is Professor Homa. Welcome to CS 235, and today we're going to learn about getting dates, except it's going to be JavaScript dates. And if you go to w3schools.com and you go to the JavaScript tutorial, you're going to go down to dates, and hopefully you've been checking out some of these so far, but I'll point you to the ones that you need to look at a little bit in more detail. A couple things about dates we're going to look at. First, the dates. What the date is it's just a way that JavaScript uses an object to get today's date. And they have a sample here, and all that it is it just runs this little code here, which is not code, but it's kind of a date format. It's today's date, and it's whatever the date is, and you can see it right now. It's Tuesday, January 31st, 2017. It's 10:34 in the morning. It's a.m. So, and that will update every time you run it again. It'll update. It doesn't have a clock that runs continuously, but it's generating the date when you first run the code. So that's all that object does. That's built into JavaScript. That's nothing that I did special, but it's a date object. And here it is right here. And the way this code is setting up, it's just putting it in that, the JavaScript is putting it in that little demo paragraph that W3 Schools does. They create a paragraph with an ID called demo with nothing in it. And then when you target it with that get element by ID, it basically puts whatever you want in there. Right now it's putting in inner HTML, the date object, and it's writing it out on the page. And we're going to work with that date object. And what we're going to do, and I'll close this up, I'll go back to date methods. We're going to use some get date methods for people who need to get dates. And here's some methods that we're going to use to get dates. We're going to get the date, which is actually the number during the month, you know, the 1st through 31st. We're going to get the day, which is either Sunday through Saturday. And keep in mind they use numbers, so that's going to be a little trickier for us. The full year, it's not just year, it's full year, which is 2017. And we're not going to mess with time right now, but there's hours, milliseconds, minutes, things like that. And then the other one we're going to use is get month. So we'll get the month, and that's 0 through 11. And you might be thinking, wasn't there 12 months? Yes, 0 is January and 11 is December. It's not what we usually use on a calendar, but that's the way it is right now. So we're going to use these methods to extract any data that we want from the date object, whether we want to pull the date, the day, the year, whatever we want, and then we could display it the way we want. Then we could kind of, write strings, and that's what we're going to do. And so we're going to start with this, and let me just show you kind of the finish here. We're going to work in JS-do again, just to start, so we don't have to worry about any software right now. This is a finished version. We're going to do it in 3 steps, and this is actually part 3. And what we're going to do here, if you look over it, this is the final code here, and again, it's nothing spectacular, so don't. It's not a big deal, but it does involve a lot of code. If you see all this code here, there's a lot of code we're going to have to write. And what it does is it starts with the date object, which is this up here. And what we're going to do is we're going to extract some things using the date methods. And we're going to start off by just practicing and just writing out the date method in a statement. And we're going to get the full year. We're going to get the month, which is January, which is 0. We're going to get the day of the week, which right now is Tuesday, and that would change. If you're doing this on a Wednesday, that would be different. It'll be, if it's tomorrow, it would be February, and the day of the week would be a 3. And then also, this is the date. The date would be 1 if you were doing it on February 1st or February 2nd or whatever. But so these will change based on what day you're doing it. I'm doing it right now on Tuesday, January 31st, so that's what's showing up. So this will not always look the same, but you should have the same results when you submit it, and then if you submit the link, it should show whatever day it is. This is what we're working towards, and the way we're going to start, I'm just going to go into my code here, and we're going to start initially just by pulling these dates, just by using the date methods, practicing with them, using some variables, and just kind of taking the date object and pulling these values in here and displaying them on a page. And then the next step, part 2 of this, we're going to take it a little bit further, and we're going to create a string that's basically going to pull these values together and write them out in a string. Unfortunately, when you first write them out in a string, they're going to say 2/0/31/2017. It's not going to say January, and it's not going to say Tuesday or whatever day of the week it is. And what we're going to do is we're going to have to use an array to kind of make those numbers translate into either the day of the week or the month name. So that'll be a little more work, and that'll be our 3rd step. The part 3 of this will be actually making it work like that. So it's not a lot of information on a page, but I like working with these date methods because I think they teach a lot about JavaScript, and they get you used to writing statements and being very careful with your syntax. But we're using variables, and we're learning how to write code. So that's what we're doing with this. We're learning how to write code. We're going to use arrays. different methods of writing arrays, and obviously if you have syntax that's wrong or anything, you're going to get errors. So you're going to learn how to fix those too. So before we get into any complex functions or anything, we're going to start with that first. Okay, so again, this is going to be just the beginning part, so this will be a couple videos. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go to JavaScript date methods. The first thing you'll do is go to the JavaScript, and you'll go down where it says date methods, and you can check out the date methods, and we'll start with some code that you could copy and paste. So what I'll do is I'll look for I think just the getDay method. Any one of these would really work, but I'm going to go with the getDay method. We'll try that first. And I'll click on the tryout editor so that I actually see the code, because just the code that you see initially doesn't have the full, the doc type and all that. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy it from W3 Schools and go to JS_do. So I'll just type in js.do. And there's my Homa 235. And I'm just going to paste it in here. Whatever starts here, I'm just going to paste it in and paste that code in. And I could just run the code. And you can see what this does so far. It just has this sentence that says the getDay method returns the weekday as a number. It has this demo paragraph. I'm going to get rid of this right now. So we're going to get rid of this. And we're not going to call this demo. This is just an ID for an empty paragraph. It's just a name you give it. So I'm just going to call this, I'll just call it full date. And I think for now I'm going to actually write things without camel case. I'll just put all lowercase just to make it easier right now. So I'll call that full date object. We probably won't use it again, so I'll just call it full date object right now, or maybe just date object. I'll call that date object. So that's what that's going to be. If I run my code, you're going to get an error because it's not seeing anything right now. So what we're going to do in here, we have a statement, and you've seen this before. We use the document get element by ID, and it's saying demo. So we don't have a demo, so I got to copy this, and I'm going to paste it here. So now it's pulling from the date object, it's pulling it from that paragraph ID. So we're getting that element by ID, and then in the inner HTML, what we're going to write, we're going to use a date method. Now, you might say, what's this D here? Now, we could just do this. If you just did this, I'll start by doing this. I'll get rid of this getDay, and I'll just put D. And you might say, why do you have D there? Well, we're actually creating a variable called var D equals new date. That's the way to kind of instantiate an object. We're creating an instance of that object. So by creating a variable that says D equals, and remember this equals is an assignment. We're basically creating a variable with the keyword var. The name of our variable is just D, and it's assigning the value of the new date object. So it's creating a new date object, and then down here, this statement is basically writing it to the page. And it's writing D, so we could use D in place of date or anything else. So if I run the code now, I won't get an error, and it's just going to write that big date object. Okay, that's not too much fun. There's not a lot of fun things going on right there. So let's do another, and I'm just going to keep copying and pasting things. So I'm going to copy this line, and I'm going to paste a second one, and what I'll do is I'll do full year. I'll start here, and instead of date object, I'll just call this full year. And again, I'm just going to use all lowercase for now. And now we have an ID of the paragraph. That's all it is the ID of the paragraph. And you can have variables that are the same name as the ID. They're two different things. So you can use the same names if you want to, or maybe you don't want to. But we'll see how it goes. All right. So we now have a paragraph called full year, and we're going to display the full year. Now right now we're displaying the date, and I'm not going to remove this. I'm just going to copy it. And we're going to do our first method. And what we're going to do is now it's not date object, so we have to change this first. We're going to paste that there. We're going to say full year, and it's going to be inner HTML, and we're going to put D dot. This is the way we basically extract something from the date. So it's basically a child of the date object, and we're going to use a method called get year. And I'll put year now. Now I'm doing that wrong, so I just want to point that out. If I say get year, and I'm going to run the code, I get 117. And you're like, what's that? It's not the year 117. That's because this date method is wrong. It's actually, if you remember the date methods, if you go back to the date methods and you look at them, it's actually full year. It's not year, it's full year. There's not one that says get year, so it's full year. So I just wanted to just point that out, that's wrong. I didn't get an error, but it wrote 117. So if I put full year there and I run the code, now it's coming up as 2017. And I'm just going to do this 3 more times. And these are pretty easy. So I'm going to copy another one, and I'm going to call this one after the year. We'll just go kind of smaller increments. I'm going to call the next one month. And then I'm going to copy this. So each time I'm basically copying a paragraph, and then I'm copying a statement, so that there's a different statement for each paragraph. This statement is going to be for the paragraph month. So that's the name of that's the ID name of that paragraph, month. So now we're targeting the right paragraph, and instead of d.full year, and this one's pretty easy, it's d.month. And if we run the code, it's not coming up. Oh, yeah, it is. Yes, it is. I'm sorry. I was looking for a third one. And if we run the code, it comes up as 0, which is actually January, because it's still the last day of January. So let's do 2 more here. So I'm going to copy this, and you could copy this first if you want. And I'm going to make a new paragraph up here. And again, each time I make a paragraph, I give it a new ID name. So I have another paragraph, and this one's going to be called date for this one. And date will be the number date, and then day will actually be the weekday. And you could call it weekday if you want to, if that makes more sense, because sometimes it's confusing. So this one will be date. And this is different than the date object, so we're okay. And then we're going to basically get date. And it should come out to 31st when we do this. When we run the code, it should be 31, because today's the 31st. And we'll do one more here. And this one is going to be get day. So we have 4 statements here, well, 5 statements. The first one is the date, using the variable for date, and then we're just appending to the date variable, and then using these methods that are attached to them. And notice they have parentheses that are empty. And also I need another paragraph here. And we'll call this one day. And we also have to target the right paragraph, because if I did it right now, it doesn't do anything. It's kind of confused. It doesn't know what to put in there, because it's targeting that one. The last thing it's doing, it's targeting that, and it's putting the day in there. So it's actually putting Tuesday in there where we had 31st, because it's the next statement. So it's overriding the previous statement. So make sure you fix that, and this one will be day. Make sure you're targeting. These paragraphs should all target to the proper ID, and then they're all using the proper methods here. So you can see that's why we're just doing this as a little repetition to practice this. And now if I run the code, I have basically 5 paragraphs here. One with the date object, full year, which is 2017. The month was 0, which is January. The date, which is the 31st. And then the day, which is 2, which actually translates to Tuesday. So this is what you want for part 1. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to save this, and it puts a number there. And I'm going to call this ex2-getdate. The other one had alert. We'll just call it getDate. And I'm just going to call it, you could put P1 or PT1. I'm going to call this part 1 because I actually made other ones that have PT. So if you want to just call it ex2-getDate part 1, because we're going to have 3 parts, this will be the first one. That way you could kind of build on to the other ones, and you won't really lose anything. So once you change that name, you could save your update. And now you should have that in your list of when you go to your username, it should show you that there. Now we're going to keep building on this. So we're just going to build on it, and then we'll resave it as part 2. But this is the first part of this, so I'm going to stop now. And what we're going to do next is we're going to take these values and put them in a string and display them in a string. And that's going to require a little bit more variables and things like that. So I'll stop here, and then we'll be on to the next part of this assignment, which is part 2 of ex2-getDate.